Can everybody hear me okay? Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody's doing good on this beautiful cloudy day. Census, do you have everybody for roll call, or can we just go ahead and go on to approving the meeting summaries for the previous minutes?
We can go to approval.
Okay. So first item on the agenda is the approving the May 30th meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve? Has everybody had a chance to look at them, and are there any additions, deletions, or corrections?
I read through them this morning and they looked good to me. I will make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
Did you make a motion to approve? Okay.
Yes, this is Lindsay.
Could you, just for the benefit of note takers?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Julie Haggerty made the second, I believe, so.
Lindsay,
Okay.
did you make the motion?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lindsay made the motion and Julie has seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Everybody got in the chat? I gotta wait for the chats. Okay. All those opposed, same sign? Motion carried. Are there any changes, additions, or deletions to the July 8th meeting minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I can make that motion. This is Lindsay.
Okay. Lindsay's made the motion. And Jamie has seconded in the chat. Okay, all of those in favor of approving, say aye.
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 Everybody a minute. Okay, all those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay, financial reports. The 2023 audit report, I'm assuming that's why Robert is here today. So we will turn it over either to Phil or Robert.
I would just introduce Robert Endritz, who is with Denman. Denman has provided our audit for a period of time. I've lost track, but we appreciate them being back to provide our audit services. The audit report was presented by Robert to the Finance Subcommittee earlier this week, and he's come back for a repeat performance for the full ESS committee. And Robert, I'm driving today, so you tell me what page you want to be on, and we'll get you there. So welcome, Robert.
Excellent. Thank you, Phil. Good morning. I think I've probably spoken to most of this group before, if not all of you, but just a quick introduction. Again, my name is Robert Endritz. I'm a partner with Denman, a CPA firm here in West Des Moines that works in this niche of local government services, which ESS is kind of in the field of. So we were in the field with Phil and the rest of his team in April, going through our audit procedures for the calendar year end of 2023. We do have that audit report here to look at with you. And as Phil mentioned, we did share this just a couple of days ago with the Finance Committee, but here again to give you a chance to look over these documents and ask questions of us. So the document you have in front of you here is what we call our governance letter. This letter is issued with every single audit our profession issues, and it's merely our opportunity to speak directly to you as members of governance about matters that we think warrant your attention. So sometimes I'll joke that this is our dirty laundry letter. So if we have issues, complaints, concerns, frustrations, things that we think governance should be aware of, they're going to be listed here. So I always encourage boards, when you pick up an audit report, always start with this letter, because if we have real things that we need to talk about, they're going to be right here for you to look at. With that said, I promise you that you will never read an exciting governance letter from Denman without getting a phone call from me first. So since you haven't heard from me before now, you should rest assured that there's not a whole lot of excitement in here. And indeed, it is a relatively dull and boring governance letter, which is the governance letters we like to write. I will point you to, Phil, if you could scroll up just a smidge there on the second page, probably the two most important things I'm going to say it all this morning are just a little above us there, Phil. Can I have you scroll back up? Up. There we are. Oh, too far. The very top of that next page, Phil. There are two paragraphs related to the prior page. Page.
Go down one.
Okay, I'm sorry.
There we are. There you go. Difficulties encountered in performing the audit and disagreements with management. I'm happy to say that we had no difficulties and no disagreements with management. Field work went very, very well. Phil and Lisa and the rest of that team have been absolutely fantastic to work with and make our job very, very easy. So don't want to bury the lead. That is by far and away the most important thing I can tell you this morning. Jumping into the actual audit report then, which follows this document, I believe. I'll point you to page 3 first, and this is our independent auditor's report. Just a couple reminders here in this 2-page letter. First, the financial statements we're about to look at are management's financial statements. They're not Denman's, they're management's. Management is responsible for ensuring that those financials are complete and accurate, that they conform with accounting standards, and that controls are in place to support the accuracy of those statements. Our job as your auditors is to perform an audit and to express an opinion on whether or not management's financial statements are accurate. So for us to do that, we first start by assessing the risk to the financial statements. What accounts, what balances, what transactions posted by management present the highest risk of an error. And then we're going to develop audit strategies based on our understanding of those risks. So those strategies might include analytical procedures and inquiries of management. It'll include independent confirmation of accounts and balances. It'll include obtaining supporting documentation and recomputing transactions and balances as well. So all that testing, all that work we're doing allows us to gain evidence to support the accuracy of management's financial statements. And in that second paragraph on this letter, we do have our audit opinion, and we are issuing what we call a clean or unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which is the highest level of assurance our profession can provide regarding the accuracy of these financials. So with that foundation laid there, we can go ahead and dive into those financial statements. The schedule following this 3-page letter is what we call management's discussion and analysis. It's written by management and provides some context to the financial statements. I'm going to go ahead and skip right over the section though, because we're going to dive into the full financials here, where we can kind of dig into the weeds here a little bit further. So I believe we want to jump down to page 9 of our report. So one more page down there, Phil, where we have the statements of net position or balance sheet. There we are, as of December 31st, 2023, with the prior year to compare to. Not a whole lot here I want to point you to, just a couple of changes over the prior period. Very top line item, their cash balances, they are down about $400,000 over the prior period. That has a lot to do with the real estate market and the fact that ESS was continuing to make investments in its infrastructure, its softwares and systems during calendar year 2023. Cash balances still remain very, very strong. You're in a good position to allow the entity to continue to make those investments. But that's why you're seeing that reduction in cash balances. Total assets at the end of the calendar year, right about the halfway point of that page, 2.9 million compared to just a shade over 3 million last year. So a modest decrease in total assets during the current year. Liabilities remain very comparable to the prior period, about $260,000, which leaves us, if you just scroll just a smidge further down there, Phil, with a net position of about 2.6 million, down roughly 100,000 from the prior year. Following the schedule is the statements of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, in short, and the income statement. And again, here you have the prior year on the right-hand side to compare against. Pretty significant decrease in revenue this year, entirely related to the current economic condition and the real estate market. Recording fees down about 6.3 million. And of course, those are offset by decreases in those recording distributions. Total expenses, total revenues then just shy of 34 million compared to 41.5 in the prior period. Expenses, of course, are going to trend right along with the revenue as we see those recording distributions decrease during the year as well. Total expenses of just north of 34 million compared to 41.3 million last year. Puts us in a change in net position, a bottom line, effectively, a deficit of right around $100,000. The final financial statement is what we call the cash flow statement. This just provides some information on how cash is being used and generated by the organization during the current fiscal year. It's a critically important schedule in understanding how healthy of a cash position the organization is in and how its operations are effectively affecting cash. So it's pretty noisy, but I'll point you to that first subtotal there. Net cash provided by operating activities, about 1/3 of the way down the page, to the good of $7,000 here in the current year. You compare that to prior year, obviously a much better cash position last year when the real estate markets were a little bit more favorable to us. But also last year was inflated a bit because of a change in strategy and how ESS is utilizing the electronic transaction fund, and it was drawing down a cash reserve in that fund during the year. So that number is in the prior year a little inflated because of that. The point I want to make here, though, is that your operations are still cash positive. You're not running deficits from operations. You did use cash this year, but the use of cash you can see right below in that second category, cash flows from capital and related financing activities. $427,000 was invested in infrastructure and in the development of systems and software during the year. So it's that investment in the long-term viability and capital needs of the organization that's resulting in that use of cash, which was very much intentional. Following the financial statements, there's 3 or 4 pages worth of note disclosures. That just provides a little bit more depth and context to the organization's financials. That first couple paragraphs in particular are pretty useful in reminding us of how the organization is structured, the accounting models it uses. But for the sake of this discussion, I was going to go ahead and jump right over those and point you to the very back of our report where there is yet another 2-page letter from us. If you don't mind, Phil, rolling down towards that 2 pages, which should start on page, I believe, 13 of our report, 14, excuse me. This here is yet another letter we issue as part of our audit regarding our work on internal controls. So while we do not audit internal controls, we do take the audit process to use that opportunity to gain an understanding of your control environment and structures, those checks and balances, those systems and processes used by management in developing the financial records. And so while we're not auditing them, we do get this opportunity to gain that understanding. And if we identify deficiencies while we gain that understanding, we do have a responsibility to share those deficiencies with governance, with you. So this is our letter. This provides us that opportunity to share any findings we have with you. And I'm happy to say we don't have any. So it takes us 2 pages to acknowledge that. But in this letter, you will find that we did not identify any deficiencies or weaknesses during our work on internal controls for the organization. Again, it's not a full audit of the controls, but it is a pretty robust effort by us to gain that understanding. And again, no deficiencies were identified. That really brings me to the end of what I had to share with you this morning. Can I answer any questions from the group on our audit work, the audit report, the financials?
Zoom.
There's no questions in chat.
Okay, you go back in. Is he there?
I'm sorry, what?
Huh?
Ooh,
Robert?
yeah, he's still there.
Yeah.
Got a quiet group this morning, it looks like, Phil.
Where should I be?
You're waiting to see if
Okay.
anyone had any questions,
Oh, okay.
and if not, Lisa will probably ask for approval.
Okay.
If there's no questions, then we can go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the audit. Thank you, Robert, for explaining all of that for us.
Can I ask one question? Sorry, a little late. I couldn't find my unmute. This is Natalie.
Yes.
Just that we had a balance over 250,000 about the FDIC insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to be concerned about that?
My frank answer is no. Some do. Some organizations do like to watch that very carefully and try to diversify their cash portfolio to prevent, to mitigate that risk. But if you're, watching the kind of banking industry over the past 24 months or so, there was a couple scares during the past 24 months with a couple banks in California that failed. And you saw the federal government step in very quickly to make sure that everyone was maintained and kept whole. So the likelihood of a failure with your financial institutions is quite remote, but it does happen occasionally. And when it does happen, the last thing the government wants to do is see depositors lose cash. It's really pretty damaging to the markets. So the likelihood of that being a material risk to the organization is quite remote. But it doesn't mean that there aren't avenues, if the organization wanted to diversify its cash position to prevent that risk.
Thank you, Natalie, for the question. Okay.
Thank
Does
you.
anybody else have any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the 2023 audit report from Denman Associates.
One question I did have too, the part on, just right under that, FDIC information was the retirement plan. Can somebody address that? I'm not sure what that is relating to.
So Phil might have a better answer for this than I do, but there is a plan that the employees of ESS participate in. Just a regular, pretty traditional 401k plan. Unlike
Okay.
county employees, who are members of IPERS, ESS is not members of IPERS, so this would be the retirement plan that ESS supports for its employees.
Okay, that makes sense. I was not thinking in that regard. I was thinking another. So thank you for that
Very good.
clarification.
I don't have any questions in the chat pod, I don't think. Okay. Are there any further questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the report.
This is Dylan. I'll make the motion.
Dylan makes
Jamie,
the
I'll second that.
motion. I'm sorry, did somebody second?
Jamie, I second that.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor to approve. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay. Next item is the 2024 year-to-date reports.
I do want to just say thank you again to Robert for being with us today and for the services that he and his organization have provided. It's been a very positive relationship. Every audit, I would say we learned something. We treat it as an opportunity to improve. And I think a lot of that has to do with the good communication and the approach that Denman takes to the audit. So I would just say thank you very much, Robert, again, for being with us today.
Thank you, Phil.
And with that, I will scroll down and turn to Samantha to provide the primary update on the financial reports, which were presented to the Finance Subcommittee earlier this week. Samantha.
Hello. Okay, so we'll start with the second quarter of 2024 profit and loss. I have a few things highlighted here. The local maintenance fees started coming in June. We haven't paid those all out in this quarter yet, so you'll see a little bit of an increase here. $184,241.82 for those maintenance fees, with a total budgeted income of $585,821.44, with revolving income of $8,952,821.01. I have the data center and hosting services highlighted there. We were having a little bit of an issue communicating with Light Edge and getting the billing corrected. That has been resolved as of July. But that $40,151.67 is a little bit higher than what it will be going forward. Total budgeted income of $376,971.77. The depreciation that we started doing this year is also highlighted. This quarter is a little bit higher. This is actually a year to date. We caught up with depreciation expenses, I believe, in April. So that $169,539.67 is actually for the whole year. Up to date, so the first 2 quarters. So revolving expenses, $8,933,959.47. The negative $45,921.96 is the retirement of the computer equipment. We took that off the books when we disposed of it. So the net income for the second quarter of 2024 was $730.51. We prepared a budgeted profit and loss for you, just to, it's a little bit clear. It doesn't have that depreciation expense in it. Budgeted income of $585,821.44. Budgeted expenses of $376,971.77 with a net income of $208,849.67. Just a reminder, those maintenance fees did get billed out in June, so that's why you're seeing a little bit of a higher income here. Year to date, the first 2 quarters of 2024, budgeted income of $952,515.95. I'm gonna scroll down a little bit, Bill. Revolving income of $15,996,006.62. Budgeted expenses of $671,020.75. Again, we have that depreciation expense highlighted. Revolving expenses, $15,986,421.41 with a net income for the first 2 quarters of 2024 of $36,239.81. And then a budgeted only profit and loss, budgeted income of $952,515.95. With budgeted expenses of $671,020.75 with a total net income of $281,495.20. Balance sheet as of June 30th, total assets equal total liabilities of $2,957,657.54. Fund 255 for June 2024, ending balance was $158,631.30, with the total receipts that were billed out and approved by the Finance Committee of $40,134.30. And the balance sheet for the Fund 255 account.
I would just supplement what Samantha said in terms of the net income looking a little bit higher, and that is primarily due to the fact that we've received income for the maintenance from the counties, and those disbursements are being made. There are some that still need to be made in terms of reconciling billing from some of the service providers, but basically that ends up being a wash. And, the bottom line is that this has been a tight budget year. We've made a number of reductions in the budget. We are watching expenses, monitoring income on a monthly basis. And, I would just say the financial reports reflect that. So I'll stop there. I'll talk about the trends here in a minute, but I would defer back to Samantha and Lisa for questions on the financial reports.
Are there any questions from Samantha? Has anyone had a chance to look through them?
Sorry, I was talking and I was muted. Looking at meeting expenses, I know we're looking at tight budgets. Should we look at the remainder of our meetings for the year to change those to all Zoom calls so that we can maybe save, I know it's only a couple grand, but we can save some money in that regard? Is that something we want to look at as a group? Or
So Lindsay, I think that will come up when we get to the budget. But she was suggesting that maybe future ESS meetings for the remainder of the year move to virtual to save some money there.
Yeah, I think we have made some adjustments in that regard. You know, it roughly is in the neighborhood of $1,000, $1,200 to have a face-to-face meeting. Primarily, that is due to travel expenses, mileage, etc. Not very many of you, stay overnight, so we don't really have that many lodging expenses. So, the increase that we made a while back to match the federal reimbursement rate did have an impact. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't meet. And I think when we look at the budget amendment, we are somewhat heading in a better direction. And resources for a November face-to-face meeting or a face-to-face meeting later this month to talk about policy issues. Those are still incorporated in the budget. And we can look at that. Honestly, Lindsay, if we look at everything, to see what we can do differently. Ordinarily, Lisa or I might be attending the PREA conference in person, but that's just not in the code. So we're gonna have to participate virtually this year.
which
and-
virtually is just fine. You still get a great, it's still great.
And I haven't been to a MISMA meeting, in over a year, so it's just one of those things. But I believe it is important for the governing board to meet face to face. Just having that face to face conversation really can be very meaningful. So I don't think we're in such dire straits that we have to do that yet, but we certainly should if we needed to. Yeah.
And
Bill,
Lindsay,
thank you.
I would agree
To
that
anticipate.
there is good content that you can participate in through PREA. What you miss by not being there in person are the face-to-face conversations with service providers that we simply don't get to have locally.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm very well aware. Yeah, it's no different than us going to ISAC annual conferences or winter symposium and not having that interaction afterwards. But you're still, there is still benefit to it, is what I was alluding to.
Thank you.
And I kind of expanding on that, do you anticipate that we're gonna have with the upcoming modernization project, are we going to have a lot more ESS meetings? And if so,
Well, I think we're having a little bit more meetings right now than we maybe even ordinarily have because we've got a lot of policy issues on the table, and they're big items. We don't have small issues right now. When we get to, let's think optimistically and say that we're successful in the legislature, I actually think it's going to be more of a normal circumstance where we're taking software development and those types of implementation issues through the standards committee and the ESS committee. And I think it will feel a lot more normal to you. So I'm not looking to have, I'm hoping that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we have to have a lot of meeting time to work through issues. I think that's what's happening right now. And we'll work through those. And then nothing we're gonna like better than just to get the implementation, because sometimes that's even easier. So we'll have to see. Hopefully you won't be asked to participate in more meetings than we are now, for sure.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking if there's gonna be increased meetings, not only for ESS, but all of the committees, that's gonna be a substantial increase in the money that we pay out for meetings.
I
Have
think the
we-
different, if I had to kind of predict a difference, it's that, you know, would you like to have face-to-face meetings for the subcommittees too? Because they need to have that face time also, and we really haven't had as much opportunity to do that. You know, so, having a face-to-face meeting for finance, having maybe one or more face-to-face meetings for the standard subcommittee and whatever work groups we have going, that's what I'd really like to see happen, because we've had to get away from that right now because of the budget. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure we can, I'm gonna be optimistic and say we're gonna be able to do what we need to do.
Okay. Okay, did anybody else have any questions on the year-to-date reports? Anne did make the comment that scheduling face-to-face time during ISAC when we're already in Des Moines might be a good consideration. It would cut down on mileage and some other things if you could schedule around meetings that we already have in that time frame. That's a good suggestion. Something to think about. Was there any other comments, suggestions, questions? If not, I'll entertain the motion to approve the reports.
This is Julie. I moved to approve the reports.
Okay, I have a,
This is Denise. I'll second that motion.
okay. I have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay, we'll move on to the 2024 budget amendment.
Actually, I just want to start out by talking a little bit about trends. We kind of had an anomaly happen in June where we actually saw the e-submission numbers drop below 2023 levels, as well as being below 2021 and 2022. That was not expected. But on the other hand, we had an unexpected jump in e-submission activity in July. You put those two things together, we ended up having a couple of decent months. I've got no magic crystal ball, but inflation figures were announced to be closer to the target that the Fed has set in order to reduce their interest rate. And at least as of this morning, the projection is that the Fed is going to reduce rates. And I think the best we can do is say we're going to be optimistic that things might loosen up in the marketplace in the coming months, and we certainly hope that happens. From a budget perspective, when you look at that and you say, okay, what should I be doing? Should I be tightening harder? Should I be, be more optimistic? Can we loosen up on things? And I would just share with everyone that the approach that we've taken in terms of budget planning is that we can make a few adjustments, but overall, we're basically still in the same position that we were before. That is, we're being conservative in terms of expenditures. We're not being too optimistic on revenue, and we hope what will happen is we'll be pleasantly surprised, as we approach your next meeting in November, which is the next time we would, in a regular fashion, amend the budget. So I guess in terms of messaging about what was the attitude of preparation of the budget? I think it was to maintain that conservative stature, but where there was opportunity to do some things that really were important and needed to be done, is okay, we made room for those. We made some small adjustments downward in some areas where we felt confident that we could hold those expenses down. And so we tried to be judicious in putting these budget recommendations together. So that's sort of the foundation that we're working from. The finance subcommittee did meet and they did approve the budget as it's presented to you today. Obviously, they're just making a recommendation that the final decision is up to you as members of the governing board. A memo was prepared and is included in your packet to describe the changes in the budget, and I'll let that stand on its own. I think it would be just as productive if we move to the budget document itself and then just walk through how that was constructed and what are the changes that have been made. So I did run through this with the finance subcommittee, and it is addressed somewhat in the memo, but I'll just repeat it here. Generally, our approach to budgeting is that when we get to a period where we reconcile all the accounts through a period of time, we convert the budget from budget to actual. So the numbers in the period of January through June are all reflective of what actual expenditures have been. And generally speaking, that is reflected in that burnt orange color. And this is true for both revenue and expenses. Then in July, you'll see that we've denoted things in the color green. And that is just to acknowledge that most of the expenses and revenues are known for that period, but we haven't totally closed the books and completed every reconciliation. Your financial reports today were through June. We'll deal with the financial reports for July with the finance subcommittee at their next meeting in September. So we know most of the information. Most of it is certain, but it hasn't totally closed yet. So we put it in the budget recommendation with high confidence that the numbers are correct, but we still put a qualifier on it that it could potentially be subject to change. Then as you move into the revenue and expenses for August, obviously we're in the middle of August. We don't know everything yet. And so we're looking at everything from a projection. What do we think it's going to be based on our past experience? And what are the things do we think need to be changed? In this particular case, if there is an item in blue, it just means that it was approved at that level at your previous meeting, the last time we did the budget, which is in May. And so it really hasn't changed compared to that period. And I'm primarily talking about the figures in August through December. But there are some things that we did make some adjustments in, and I'm going to walk you through those. So pretty much anything that you see in blue, except for the total at the end of the row, is as it was presented at your previous budget action. So the changes that were made were that at the beginning of the year, we projected income primarily from registration fees of $7,000 for the deputies conference that is scheduled for September. We have, through the period of May through July, received some of the registration fees, and originally we had the total $7,000 number listed in July. That was how the original budget was put together. So we've earned some income, but we have an unknown that is still a projection. And I just simply adjusted the numbers so that we ended up with a total of 7,000 at the end, which is where we started. I would share with the committee that we're having conversations with the team about whether or not we're going to have sufficient attendance to justify holding that conference. So we're approaching some decision deadlines, and we'll be making that choice in the next few weeks. I'm not too concerned about the revenue number itself or the expense number, because we basically structure that particular conference to be break even. So it doesn't really have an impact on our bottom line that much, but we do track it within the regular budget. I probably shouldn't have done it that way, but I did highlight the revenue number in July for e-submission in pink, because the higher numbers of e-submission did increase our income above projections, but it's not really, it's just a change from budget to actual, not really a policy change. So the policy change in the budget comes really down to one thing, and that is that we're staying with the projections for e-submission activity. Again, I would say I'm hoping that we are conservative, because we did look at past activity in every month to set the projection, and generally speaking, August is a pretty good month, but it drops off at the end of the year, and that's reflected. So no change in the projection there. But as we look at the overall recording activity in the state, and then look at our experience in the first 7 months, income through Fund 255 from the $1 e-commerce fee, that's a part of the base recording fee. That just has not been keeping up. We originally built the budget with an estimate of $42,500 across the board for every month. It just has not stood up to that. It's been less than 40 in a number of months, and we did have the most recent 2 months were better, but still not where we wanted them to be. And so the recommendation is to reduce the budget projection for September through December from $42,500 a month in income to $40,000 a month in income. And so that does affect our bottom line, but not a huge amount. Total revenue for the year is still projected to be above $1.7 million. So other than that, we really haven't made any adjustments in the revenue projections. We're gonna stick with most of the projections that we set back in May. Okay, that's the revenue side, so not a lot of change there. Let's walk through the changes that we're making in projected expenditures. One of the first ones that you see relates to the accounting position, and this has also affected the other positions that are outlined in the memo, including the policy coordinator, the account manager, and one of the developers. And that is for those who are participating in our healthcare benefit plan that is offered. We are in an open enrollment period right now, and based on the figures that we've received from our employment organization and also from Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is our primary healthcare provider, we're expecting the cost to increase by about 15%. So for each of the positions that is taking advantage of the healthcare benefit plan, or that might be taking advantage of it, we're projecting about a 15% increase in cost, and that benefit amount increase is reflected in the budget. So those have been adjusted slightly upward to reflect that, particularly in the months of October, November, and December. the new benefit period begins on October 1. So that's where we see that having to take place. So this would be applicable for the accounting position. I'm going to adjust my screen here just a little bit. So you've got the accounting position, and then if I scroll down, you can see that it also relates to Lisa's position as account manager. It would affect Census's position as the policy coordinator, and it also affects one of our developers. We did not make any adjustments for any of the part-time employees because they are not participating in the healthcare benefit plan. And then other full-time employees that we have, not everybody participates in the ESS plan. They may have a spouse or just are in a different situation where they have chosen not to take advantage of that. So those are the adjustments that are reflected there. It's not a huge increase, but it is an increase in projected expenses from where we were in May. Probably the biggest policy type change here is a recommended increase in expenditures for government relations services for Bob Rafferty and Nick Laney. They have been involved in some of the, maybe I should say a lot of the planning that Census and I have engaged in terms of thinking about strategy for the legislative session, looking at things like, who are the champions that we're going to ask to file the legislation for us? What are we going to do with certain types of issues? And certainly they've been very involved in strategizing with respect to the various stakeholder groups. In fact, pretty much every meeting that we have had with any of the stakeholder groups, either Bob or Nick have been participating in. I think the basic idea is that in the current engagement, basically what we did is set the engagement based on prior years, which was primarily in monitoring activity or and being in a position to be reactive to anything that might come up in the legislative session. This year, we are talking about being much more proactive, working with the Recorders Association to advance a policy initiative that would affect fees and income, not just for county budgets, but also for the ESS and our land records project itself. It's a heavy lift. And from my point of view, we need all hands on deck to help with that if we want to succeed. I'm not going to be one to be up at the Capitol, even though I know a lot about it. Census certainly is going to be a part of that process. But we have to recognize that she's still building her connections and experience up there, whereas Bob and Nick, just are in a better position to help us with that. So I asked Bob and Nick to estimate the additional effort that they would be making, and they made a proposal that was roughly in the neighborhood of about $16,000 more than what they had agreed to in the original engagement agreement. With this, by the way, is a separate action item, so we'll get to that too. And then I'll just say it up front just to get it out of the way. If you want to deal with the engagement amendment first before you do the budget, it's totally okay to me. Honestly, they go together, so whatever your preference is fine with me. So in taking a look at their proposal and recognizing our budget situation, I wanted to be a little bit more flexible in planning for the 2025 budget if I could do something more in the current budget and invest resources in preparation for the legislative session, that's where it made the most sense to me. So what I have advanced here is basically a $3,000 increase for a 4-month period, which is a total of $12,000. And then expecting that when Bob and Nick proposed their engagement for 2025, there would be an increase in that year as well, but not for the entire year, just for the legislative session. So I would not expect an equivalent increase next year, but sort of a partial or proportionate increase for the legislative session. So we're not acting on anything related to the 2025 budget. This is not a commitment upfront to anything in 2025. That will be addressed at your November meeting. But we've got a lot of work to do between now and December this year. And honestly, $12,000 for what we have to do is a very modest amendment, in my opinion. And we're making adjustments elsewhere to reflect that. So we can talk about each item separately. Allow me to just continue on and explain the rest of the changes. So the next item is in the category of, sorry, get to the right place here. The next category is in the category of office tech support. You may recall that we changed technology service providers earlier this year, and our experience with them has been very positive. And in fact, the expenses have been lower than we originally projected. So I've actually reduced the budget for that by about $1,500 compared to the previous budget. And that's just a reflection of the fact that we're getting a better value for those services than we were with our previous service provider. It's not a huge reduction, but I have left a little breathing room in there in case we need an hour or two to address a specific issue. But it is a reduction compared to the current budget. Then looking at the next item is a couple of items related to the education and outreach budget. So there are 3 things that we've done. The first is we've added about $750 into the budget so that myself and one other, or maybe a shared member of the team, could participate in the upcoming PREA conference. This would be virtual only. We had taken it out of the budget altogether. And I know we need to at least do one because I'm a speaker. I'm going to be speaking remotely, but we felt like we needed to participate in that. The second thing is the $610 item that you see. Basically, that's about a $20 a month increase. Kristen has been paying out of her own pocket money to pay for the use of a software called Canva. And she made a request to me if the project couldn't cover that expense for her by buying a 1-year subscription of that, which would be about $20 a month. And so I said yes to that, and that has been added to the budget. The next thing that is there, we did not put any resources into promotional materials this year. We're running out of pens and other things to provide to people to promote our land records. We are going to be attending conferences and other meetings that we still do need to promote the project. And so she requested about $1,500 to replenish our supplies, and I did add that back into the budget. As
Can I
I
just
mentioned earlier in the
Wait,
present,
someone had a question.
yes.
Can I just ask a really quick question while I'm thinking of it? The Canva,
Yes.
what is that? The Canva software, what do we use that for?
It's for design.
Okay,
So there is, I'm not 100% sure on what Kristen has had.
I'm online too.
Oh, okay, Kristen.
And I
think
can
in using
yeah, I
personal
can
license-
answer that.
Okay.
I can answer
go
that
ahead.
directly. Yeah, so Lisa is right in explaining that it's a design resource, but it's also more friendly to collaborate with the team. So some of the last few handouts that you guys have seen in regarding legislation and the policy brief that Census has written has been created in Canva. It also gives us access to some stock photos, which is actually really helpful to use. So it's an additional design software that's team friendly.
thank you.
You're welcome.
I personally am a huge Canva fan myself. A lot of our posts come from Canva. So
See, I'm not tech savvy, so that's why I asked, because I figured it was probably a program, but something similar to that, but
It's very user friendly.
And you can make presentations on it too.
yeah, okay. Continue, Phil.
No problem. Happy to answer questions, you guys. I'm down to the changes that were previously talked about in terms of the benefit expenses. In this case, we're looking at the account manager and the policy coordinator position. So we've talked about those already. And then I already mentioned that one of our developers does participate in the benefit plan, and that would be affected there as well. Then the next item relates to items in our software license maintenance activities. And the first one that's highlighted is Amazon Web Services. And we use Amazon Web Services primarily as our backup for mostly our image repository. When we started the year, we had budgeted quite a bit more for this because the costs were just going up and up and up. I asked Kelly to take a closer look at that and see if we could manage that better. And he has done that. So our expenses relating to the use of Amazon Web Services have gone down. And that has allowed me, particularly for the months of September through December, to reduce the amount budgeted for that to $800. Now, what I hope will happen is that we'll continue to be able to manage that, and the actual expenditure will be less than 800. But just to be conservative and not be too penny wise, I reduced it from, I think it was $1,000 down to $800. So we're in a much better position there than we were before, and so that is included. The other thing that we are in the process of doing is taking a look at our operating software. And this is not for on our equipment, but even though we are using a hosted service through Light Edge, we still have to pay for the operating software. And our system is based on a Linux model, not a Windows model. And the software that we have been using is called SUSE. Some call it SUSE. Please don't ask me to explain exactly what it does, except that it is the Linux operating software, and we have to have it. Well, we have been using the SUSE brand of that for a number of years, and we had a 3-year license, and that 3-year license was due, and both Kelly and I had a bit of sticker shock when we saw what the renewal for a 3-year license was going to be. So we did two things with that. One is we, instead of buying a 3-year license, we bought a 1-year license. And the other thing that we did, which actually was already in the budget plan, we paid for that 1-year license out of reserve funds for this year. Then the other thing that we did is we said, okay, let's go look, is there something else that we could use alternatively? And Kelly has identified some alternative Linux software that we could use going forward. And it's not something we're going to switch right away because we've already paid for the 1-year license for SUSE. But as we look ahead to the next year, we're probably going to make that switch. But there's another effect of that, and that is that the updated version of the software actually includes some security tools that are somewhat similar to the Nessus security monitoring software that we have used ever since we did the IRS security audit a few years ago. And what we have determined is that we may not need that software anymore when we make the switch to the new operating system. So the item that you see that is highlighted in pink used to be the renewal for the Nessus software. And we've determined that while we would like to have it and have it available all the way through the next year, we probably don't really need it if we're going to be switching operating system software. So as a cost-saving measure, we are not going to be renewing the Nessus license, and we're going to be planning to take advantage of the tools in the new Linux operating software that we are likely to secure sometime in 2025. And that's about a $4,100 savings in the budget. So I've taken that out of the budget. Another thing I do want to highlight, it's not really in pink, so to speak, but if you think about the cost of our redaction services. So we have had an event that caused a disruption in the regular redaction services that we have received from CSI, which is now a part of Tyler Technologies. And you'll see, I'll highlight this for you if I can. I may not be able to because of the watermark, but if you look in this line, forward file redaction services, you'll see that in June and July, the numbers are 0. So ironically, that outage is saving us 2 months worth of redaction services because we are using our alternative process. I'm going to talk more about this in a separate item, but I may as well talk about it now. What we are planning to do is restart service with CSI on their new platform sometime maybe by the end of this month. And when we do that, then we'll start paying the regular fee that we have paid them previously for redaction services. We have budgeted $4,600 for August that I'm going to say we're probably not going to use all of that, given that we're midway through the month. And we're not going to have to go back and pay for June and July. So switching those to 0 did help us out in the budget a little bit, ironically. It wasn't our intent, but that is the effect of what has happened. Then the other thing that we are planning to do, the details haven't been worked out, but once we start our regular service with them again, we're going to ask them to process the documents from that period for us, and we're going to use that as a cross-check to make sure that we didn't miss anything. And they have agreed to do that at no charge, given the inconvenience that we have experienced. And so those are things that happen that were not good things, but we're going to try and turn it into a positive. And one of the positives is that it is going to help us with the budget for the remainder of this year. So I didn't highlight them in pink because we already have not paid them. It just is, you know, as I said in a previous report to you, we're not paying for services that we didn't receive. But that has been incorporated into the budget amendment, and it's been incorporated as an accrual in the expenditures. I have not projected a budget reduction for the month of August, just to be conservative. But I do anticipate that our numbers may be down there as well. So those are some substantive things that have happened in our software license and service renewal. We're paying less for AWS. We are not going to renew our license for Nessus. We're going to substitute it for something else, with something else. And we are going to take advantage of one of the few benefits that we got out of the disruption of forward file redaction services. The last thing I want to mention, and
regarding the forward file reduction, Lindsay wants to know why we didn't charge anything in January and March.
Oh, I can speak to that.
okay,
Lindsay, they switched from CSI to Tyler Eagle, and the billing process was not as efficient as we were used to with CSI, which they would send us an invoice usually by the 5th of the month. And now CSI is having to provide the number to Tyler, and then the invoice comes to us. So we had some catch up there, and then we actually had some a little bit of incorrect billing as far as forward file and back file. So we got that all straightened out.
part of my answer to that is if you look at the number in April, the number in April, which is over $8,700, was catch up from those months.
And that's what, that was her
right.
question in.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
Does that help? Does that answer your question, Lindsay?
Okay. So the last thing on the budget is that, as you know, we have switched point of sale systems and we're now using professional solutions. We have had some questions raised with them about the fees that they're charging, which we are observing are higher than what we originally estimated. I don't have a specific answer yet, but I appreciate all the work that Samantha's doing, but we're making them go through their billing, basically line by line, and having them show us exactly what the basis for their charges are. We are working with them to make a few corrections, let's put it that way. So I'm not recommending any changes in the budget for the point of sale transaction fee estimates at this time. But we've got a couple of months here where we've been above budget, and we need to review that and see if some adjustments need to be made. I would say that the professional solutions team has been responsive. They've been answering our questions. We're not done talking to them. But the reality is that at least for the period of July and August, we're paying higher than what we originally estimated to be. We have to keep in mind that they're providing our terminal devices at no cost. So there is some balance in all of this. But that I just wanted to call that out, not because we're adjusting the budget, it's just that we're experiencing a higher expense there than what we originally estimated, and that we're not through with it yet. So
Bill, I
I'm
have
happy to answer any questions.
I have a question on the point of sale service. Is when I set up my system, they had said something about if we don't have the full address, we're gonna get charged at a higher rate. Although I see that it's being charged at 3%, is that something on that back end side that we need to be watching for? And then also, is there a difference from the tap if we are using that as well? If you can allude.
Lindsay, it's Lisa. I don't believe there's any difference in that, but that's an opportunity. I see Samantha's online. If she can note those, we'll double check with Ahmed and the other people on our team over there. I have to say that Ahmed, Fetlavi, and we have one more person, Aubrey, who's our relationship manager, have been so responsive to our questions and digging into everything. Much better than the Bank Card USA people ever were. So we'll find out about that, and I'll include that in my presentation next week at ISAC. So thank you for asking that.
Yeah, I can forward that an email that I had sent previously to Samantha too for more clarification, and it could have been that the person that was helping me was not aware of our like terms of use and all of that too. So whether that makes a difference or not.
It's important to remember that we are a different animal based on, they're used to setting it up with, the boutique down the street or whatever, where we're setting it up for 95 counties, and 2 counties have 2 locations and multiple counties have multiple devices. So it's a totally different animal, but they've been absolutely amazing to work with.
They're doing their best to try and work with us. We don't have it all figured out yet, so. Samantha, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I don't think so. I think we're gonna meet later today, right, Phil, and kind of go over everything. But Lindsay, if you have that email, I would take it.
Bill, did you see that Natalie had a question in the chat? With the ILR cloud migration, are we saving on any software license maintenance or able to do away with anything?
My answer to that is that in terms of software licensing, we're basically subscribing to a service so that we are not having to pay licensing for the operation of our switches or firewalls. That is something that is kind of baked into the service that we're getting from Light Edge. But for applications and the operation of our system, that's not their responsibility. And so the operating system for Linux and basically maintaining the applications that we operate themselves, that's our expense. Whether we use Nessus or not for security monitoring, that's on our side of the fence. So the answer is it's a mixed bag. In a number of cases, we definitely are saving money because we're not having to support the licensing of the operating systems for the equipment itself. But for things that relate to the operation of our applications or the monitoring of the operation of our applications, those are things that we are responsible for. So in some cases, we're not really saving anything because it's on our side of the fence. In some cases, we are saving because we bake those into our base agreement with Light Edge. I would say, I'm gonna say based on our experience so far, even though we had some billing issues with Light Edge, we're very satisfied with the service that we're getting from them. We are not having to rely entirely on Kelly to monitor the equipment, the firewall, the switches. It is a huge benefit in that regard.
So have you covered all of the budget amendment?
I've covered all of the budget amendment. I guess I just would point out again, since we've talked about this at previous meetings, it is a discretion of the committee about whether you want to take up certain contractual issues before you adopt the budget or not. I'm gonna say my practice has always been, you can't really approve a contract unless it's in the budget. So I've always dealt with the budget first. But if it's the preference of the committee to do a contract first and then do the budget, that is your discretion. We have two contract action items that are going to be coming up on the agenda. One of them relates to the extension of the agreement with CSI for redaction services. That really is not a budget issue. There's nothing in the budget that is going to make a difference to that one way or the other. On the other hand, the budget change, which includes an increase in expenditures with the Rafferty Group, that is something directly related to the budget. And I would just share with you, I have not reserved time for them to speak, but if anybody has any questions, I believe Bob and Nick are on the call, and they would be happy to answer any questions that you have. And I think the committee should decide what thing you want to do first. And Lisa passed me a note. I just would add a welcome to Jan Gamar from the Iowa Land Title Association, who is with us today. So welcome to Jan. And I think Erin from Boone is with us. And Renee from Dallas is with us. So I don't think I see anybody else. So welcome to everybody new. And I defer to you, Lisa, Kent, and the members of the committee about answering further questions or deciding what things you want to do first.
I have a question. This is Julie. What is that? Can you go to the bottom line, the impact that all of the changes made on the total budget?
Okay, thank you. So the bottom line is a budget amendment that you previously approved. The net income was projected to be $6,459.39. Collectively, we would be increasing projected net income to $15,096, which is about an $8,600 increase in projected net income. And that has to do with the fact that, we did cut a few things out of the budget, even though we're adding some back in. And total revenue, primarily from these submission fees, was up above projections in July.
So the $6,400 is the impact of what we previously approved. Is that what you're saying? On the expenses, I'm talking about the expense side.
On the expense side, the expenses previously were projected to be $1,751,000. In the revised amendment, the expenses would be reduced slightly to $1,729,000. Actually, more than slightly, about a $22,000 reduction.
Okay, so now that I understand, so basically with the Rafferty Group increase that you have in there, or is that separate?
The Rafferty Group adjustment is baked into that.
Okay, so with that in there, we have a $22,000 decrease
on the expense side.
On the expense side, I'm just talking about the expense side.
Yeah.
Because having the Rafferty Group increased, that's where I was wondering how it was going to impact the budget.
Keep in mind that part of that was that we did, we are using reserve expenses for some things as we had originally planned to do. But that is the net effect.
Well, I want to put on the record that it's very important that we have something because we've already put in a lot of work towards what we're trying to accomplish through legislation. So I totally get that. I just want to know what the impact is going to be on the bottom line.
I think that's a good segue. Maybe we should, in this instance, let's jump and talk about the amendment for the Rafferty Group before we approve the budget, just in case there's any questions or anything with that. If you're okay with that, Phil, and the rest of the
I'm
group is okay with that?
I'm absolutely okay with that and happy to answer any questions. If you want to talk about that first, I can scroll down a bit and just bring up the engagement amendment with the Rafferty Group so you can see that as well. As I said, it's an increase for the several months through the end of this year of $3,000 a month. That's basically all it does. And then we did modify the scope of work to add references to promoting legislation to increase reporting fees and enact policies related to modernization.
Phil, can you enlighten us all? Was this something that the Rafferty Group had come to ESS for, or is that something you had reached out to them in regards to?
Well, I would say, we've worked closely with them for a number of years. We do strategic planning with them. If you go back to the period of 21, 22, we've worked through them to get a number of things approved, not just the 28-year agreement amendment, but we passed a very important funding flexibility bill with the General Assembly. We approved we secured approval of an amendment to the handling of groundwater hazard statements, which significantly reduced the number of statements that have to be recorded. And so, to me, this is sort of an extension of that, except asking for a fee increase and looking out for what would end up being a fairly substantial budget increase for ESS. That's a much heavier lift than what we have done before. So I don't know. Did I answer your question or?
No. No. So did the Rafferty Group come in and say, we want more money because of the work is going to be more? Or was this something ESS and you and the team had reached out to them and said, hey, is this going to cost us more to make this happen?
Bill, would it be helpful? This is Bob Rafferty. We did just raise the issue for Phil with the upcoming contract. Just letting him know that we've actually been spending more time on Iowa land records this past year currently than we have for any of our other clients, and just the disproportion. As Phil knows, I've kind of been involved since pre-Phil actually in this effort. And so asking the amount of involvement that this effort is taking, and a lot of it is kudos to Phil because of how engaged he's getting many stakeholders. But that means there's been a lot of meetings, and we had asked Phil that we really needed an increase for next year, and we kind of had a discussion about how much more we're doing this year. And so we've requested, and kind of as we talk through it, to sort of compensate us for the work we've been doing this year, and we'll continue, especially in the back half of this year.
Yeah.
to really set the stage for January. I don't know if that's helpful. Phil, I think that's kind of an accurate way of how that kind of unfolded.
Let me jump back in because I think I understand Lindsay's question a little bit better. I guess I'm going to say that I did initiate the discussion but primarily from the perspective of, not saying, hey, here's some more money. It was just from my opinion, I am going to be expecting more of them. And it's from my point of view, Bob and Nick provide services at a very reasonable rate, particularly compared to what other clients may contribute. And so to me, I'm just trying to acknowledge and recognize the value that they bring to the table. So if you're asking me, who initiated this, it's true that Bob reminds me that I don't pay him enough occasionally. But honestly, I would have to say that I did initiate it. And, Bob tells me all the time that, that his other clients don't ask as much of him. And I usually tell him that his clients are just lazy and don't put enough effort into it because I do communicate with Bob and Nick a lot. So, but I'll load it. This is initiated by me.
Okay, Melissa has a question in chat. In future years where we do not have legislation, would the fee go down? It's based on year by year and activity.
Yeah, go ahead,
Our
Bob.
expectations is yes, the fee would go down if we're not being asked to kind of take on the major undertaking of build this support and move the fee increase forward. Correct. That would be our expectation.
So I have a question. Currently the 2,000 that we pay, is that considered a retainer, or do we actually use that much in your services per month?
So great question. So the way all of my contracts are structured are on a per annual basis. And the reason for that is there's a lot of the work that Nick and I do that isn't necessarily attributed to one client. For example, Nick and I were talking just last night, giving him a heads up about this meeting. He was on his way back. It was 6 o'clock at night. He had spent a couple hours at a fundraising event for legislators. In fact, he was able to talk to Shannon Lundgren, Chair of Commerce, and had mentioned this that this fee proposal was out there, kind of mentioning that expectation of an issue. So in addition, during the session, there's a lot of time, we're just up there full time. And if you've ever been up there, you will know that some of that time is sitting around trying to grab the right legislator at the right time, or just waiting for things to happen. So when you're a lobbyist, there's kind of a lot of downtime, time that is devoted to doing your job for all your clients. That's not attributed to one specific. So it really doesn't work well to have, say, bills specifically for everything you do over a 12-month period for each client. So each client we have it's more of an annual, okay, this is how much we sort of expect to be putting in this year. And that can change from client to client.
This is Nancy. Could I say something?
Mhm.
I'm not on the ESS committee anymore, but as president, what we're doing is a huge undertaking. Stacy and Megan can't spend every day during session at the Capitol. We do need somebody there, and I think for this year that this cost would be justified, because I don't have time to spend up there. Those ladies don't. None of us have the amount of time and know the people like these two gentlemen do. So And I know the amount of meetings I've been in, and Bob has been in some of those as well. It's gonna take a lot. So that's just my opinion.
I'm gonna read the comment from Stacy. She can share some lobbyist payouts with this group for July 1 of 2023 through June 30th of 2024. Iowa Credit Union paid over $162,000. Iowa Association of Realtors paid $65,000 for the last session. The Iowa Bar over $118,000. And Stacy goes on to say, as legislative co-chair for the association, I feel Bob and Nick do an outstanding job for ESS and ILR, and she is here to answer additional questions if anyone has those.
This is Julie. I want to echo what Nancy just said. What's going to come out of this particular legislation, it's going to benefit all of us. So, and hopefully it will pass. And I think all the hard work has been put in by people. I agree with, we've been to a bazillion meetings more this year than we've ever gone to. And it's because we're putting in the hard work. And it's not just going to it's going to benefit all of us. And we have to understand that in the long run, it's going to benefit all of us. We have unfunded mandates by the state. So at the very least, they should recognize that this will help fund the things that they ask us to do that they don't pay us for. So I am totally on board.
Thank you, Julie.
I want to make sure that my questions were not that I don't support this. I just wanted to have the question be answered. That's all.
No, I didn't think that, Lindsay. I just wanted to speak my little piece. Thank you.
I didn't think so either, Lindsay. It was a good question.
No, I think Bob and I appreciate the questions. I wanted to answer Lisa's question a little more on the 2,000 a month. Bob painted a picture, but the thing that retainer that we're under right now is all of the relationship building, the conversations at fundraisers. This last year, we worked on that terms of use legislation. We build relationships with all the lobbyists for all of the stakeholders. Phil does an outstanding job building all those relationships with stakeholders, but we're doing the day-to-day conversations with their lobbyists and aligning our goals up there at the State House. I think I talked to the Land Title Association's lobbyists, the Realtors lobbyists 2 or 3 times a week last session. So those are kind of the relationships we're continually building and all trying to row in the same direction. And Phil and Bob have done an outstanding job over the last several years of making those relationships really strong. But now we got to continue to leverage those as we go forward with a heavier lift with a fee increase and modernization package. That's just a lot bigger than what some of these other pieces of legislation we've worked on past years are.
And thank you, Nick. And that's kind of the reason I asked that question, is because we don't see what you guys do. So I think in making the decision, it's going to make it a lot easier if we understand what you do. I'm 100% behind it. I mean, it's helpful to know the background.
Yeah, and to add a little more color to what Nick's comment is, Monday and Tuesday of next week, for example, I'll be traveling to Southeast Iowa, meeting with legislators. We spend a lot of time in the off season going down and meeting in their location, because during session, they've got so much coming at them. You don't get the attention to develop the type of relationships and the trust factor that really is important, so that when you do talk to the legislature. And so when I go down there, our set of clients will benefit from that. For some of those legislators, we'll even, if appropriate, touch on this. But we don't bill the clients for that mileage or the hotel stay or that time. It's just to sort of emphasize, it's kind of a 12-month process that helps us, that hopefully when it becomes a critical time during the session, helps make sure we can get a legislator's trust and attention.
And I'll also say that we work hand in hand with Phil and Census throughout the session. We're flagging bills that could impact ESS or recorders. We're engaging on those. We've gotten several amendments the last few years on bills and worked on smart contracts a couple times and worked with stakeholders. So it's just what comes up. How do we respond? That's what that current retainer packages, Lisa. It includes all those services. The increase is because of the increased load of the modernization and fee increase effort.
And I'm assuming our affiliates such as the Treasurers Association, and I don't know if the auditors have anything similar, but I'm assuming that they have lobbyists as well that they have on retainer.
The auditors do for sure. That's, I believe, Mike Heller. I don't know if the treasurers do or if they just use ISAC, but they don't engage as much. So
Okay, thank you again. I appreciate all that. Any other questions for Bob, Nick, Phil?
I just want to say, I don't let Bob and Nick rest. I'm bugging them all the time, so.
I have no doubt we're getting our money's worth.
I think I bug them even more.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, then I think we probably should go ahead and vote on the amendment to the contract for the Rafferty Group. before
Lisa,
we
if
go-
it's more comfortable, Nick and I can drop off at this point,
Okay,
just so that.
You're fine. It's a
I want-
it's a public
yeah,
meeting.
you
You're
don't
good.
have to go anywhere unless you want to.
I'll
I did
make
see
them.
a question from Ann Ditchworth about the timing, and she does observe that the agreement has a period of August through November, and the budget is a little bit different than that. But it is sort of a billing timing thing. That's why it's a little bit different.
Okay. Thank you, Stacy. I appreciate that. Okay, is there any other discussion on the amendment for Rafferty Group?
So when we work on next year's budget, I guess they'll give us new numbers. Otherwise, we'll just put it in there as the $2,000 a month. Unless their fees increase, right? This is just for these few months.
Right.
So what's before you again is just for the remainder of this calendar year. It's an adjustment to the current engagement. And then what will happen is as we prepare for the November meeting where we will take up the 2025 budget, Bob and Nick will advance a proposal for a new annual engagement agreement. What I expect that to look like is that there will be something above the current engagement for, January through whatever, for the legislative session. But the hope and expectation is that we drop back to kind of where we currently are for the remainder of 2025. And so that's what's in my mind in terms of thinking ahead to the 2025 budget. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to be a little bit heavier loaded pre-session than during the session itself, just to give us a little bit of breathing room from a budget perspective, looking ahead to next year. I admit that that's just a prognostication, but I do anticipate that there'll be a new engagement for the session, but then once session is over, then probably dropping back something close to what we were doing before.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If there are none, I would entertain a motion to approve the amendment as presented.
This is one thing. I'll make that motion.
Lindsay, you made the motion. Do I have a second?
Julie, I'll second.
Julie?
Yes. I'll second.
Okay,
Okay.
it's been moved.
Contract.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the amendment for an increase in engagement for Rafferty Group. All those in favor say aye.
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 Lindsay.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Now, since the CSI one doesn't affect the budget, well, we want to backtrack and approve the budget amendments. Are there any questions regarding the budget amendments?
I do have a question for the healthcare benefit plan. Is that like just part of the salary? Like are all expenses covered for that plan by the ESS? Or just a percentage?
It's a percentage of, for healthcare. I believe ESS pays percent for employees.
So we've had to reduce it the last couple of years compared to where it was, just because of the budget tightening that we did. So we used to be in a position to be able to pay 100% of a single plan, and then 60% of a family, or employee plus children, or employee plus spouse. But we did have to make an adjustment. So we do pay 80% of a single employee plan, and we still pay 60% of the cost of a employee plus family, or employee plus spouse, or employee plus children. And so, yeah, we did have to make an adjustment, but basically the percentages are the same as in prior years. But even with that, the costs are going up about 15%.
Just like everywhere. So, okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question, kind of comment on the redaction. And I know we've talked about this in the past, but is it possible, and I know right now with the current staffing that we have, how much time did it take for the team on your end for the redaction portion? Is that something that we can seriously look at doing in-house?
Lindsay, that's included in the modernization proposal. So I think that's something we want to look at long-term.
Well, actually, yes and no. Okay, so I'm not sure we've done any estimates about how much time it has taken Lisa and Corey to actually do the redaction. But if you only look at it that way, you also have to take into account all the time that individual recording officers have had to maybe give more attention to scrutinizing documents, to notify us if they see any PII. And that's probably not what we don't want to be there in the long term. We're supposed to have a redaction process so that the counties don't have to worry about that. We found ourselves in a difficult spot. We have pivoted. We've implemented something in the alternative, and now we're about ready to go back to sort of normal. That said, even before this disruption in service happened, Kelly and I have been talking about the possibility of internalizing redaction services from a programmatic perspective. We've been exploring software alternatives in the use of OCR to do that, and potentially that could be brought in-house. We're not in a position to do that right now. So for that reason, at this moment in time, what we're going to be proposing, and this is the other item on your contract agenda, is DSI has set up a new platform in a secure environment with AWS. We're fairly confident that that secure environment is going to serve us, and we're going to restore services with them. But the extension that we're granting to them is for through the end of the year. Okay, I should say through. I don't have it in front of me. Let me bring that up. So it is for the period through June 30th, 2025. So, basically almost a year. Our intention would be to use this period to evaluate that and to see if we can identify an alternative path. I'm still of the opinion, whether we do it in-house or whether we continue to use a service provider, it makes sense to have one system with one set of PII policies, and that's what we intend to pursue. So the extension that we're proposing to do is not multi-year. It is with the idea in mind that we're going to use this year to make sure that services are happening so counties don't have to do it. But we're going to explore alternatives as well. And I would say it fits within the framework of modernization, but it is not specifically one of the items in the list that we're advancing to the legislature. And we would have to evaluate the alternatives just like any other project. Okay, where does it fit with the priorities? I think it would be worth exploring. I think it is definitely possible to do, but we're going to have to plan for it. So we're going to move from a temporary alternative back to what we were doing before, but I also potentially view that as being temporary as well.
Thanks for that, Phil. I appreciate that. Yeah, I just wanted to have the conversation of, like looking ahead and is there other options? And you're on the track. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to working on it further. So we'll talk about it again. I'm 100% sure of that.
Any further questions on the budget amendment?
We're still on the Rafferty amendment, right? Or did we do that?
No, we voted on that.
Now we're on
way
the
past
amendment to the
that.
budget. Okay, thank you.
Melissa does have a question in the chat box. Can you tell us how many redactions your staff has had to do since standing up the temporary process?
I'm gonna let Lisa answer that
I'm
question.
pulling up the document with the information right now. Hold on.
And while Lisa's doing that, Stacy was nice enough to send me a list of the affiliates and who they pay for their lobbyists. If anybody is interested in that, I can forward that to the committee, just to give you an idea of how much we pay versus the other affiliates. It looks like a couple of them use ISAC, the auditors and the supervisors. The county attorneys use a firm and they pay $45,000. The supervisors use ISAC and they pay $20,000 in retainers plus expenses for $22,707.96. Supervisors were just a flat 30,000. Treasurers, it looks like they use their own treasurers. And they're very cheap.
Okay. Lisa, can you send that out to all of us?
Yep, I will do that.
I'll put it
Thank
in
you.
the chat in a second. I kicked myself out of the
Lisa,
internet.
if you're ready, go ahead.
No, I kicked myself out of the internet, so I'm waiting to get back in. We can get that information to put in the chat pod. But the number will include anything counties have reported, as well as any back the blue requests that we've received. So as soon as I get connected.
And plus, we're at an all-time low.
We are at a lower
time.
But
Not an
we,
all-time low, but a
I
lower
want to
time.
say that we do appreciate that the counties have been really good about reporting information. We have one county that's doing some back scanning, so they're sending us information as they're scanning, even if the documents haven't been transferred to us. And we have another county that sends a report every day at the end of the day, with what they've done. So
Everyone's doing a great job.
that is correct. But I got the log here.
Okay, jump back in with the number. What do you got, man?
72.
72? Okay,
Yeah, it's not a big number.
yeah. I am personally gonna be very interested to see, after we ask CSI to, look at it from their system, just what the comparative results are. You know, the downside of what we're doing right now is it depends on human observation. And the system that we have used is a combination of OCR, optical character recognition, and further human inspection. So we'll see how that plays out. Are we still on the budget amendment?
Yes, we are. Are there any other questions? If there are none, I would entertain a motion to approve the budget amendment as presented.
Sorry, Lisa, sorry.
Nope,
I
you're fine.
didn't get my mute off in time and I couldn't type fast enough.
Okay.
Question for you guys. So you voted, I guess this hasn't passed, the second proposal has not passed our association yet. So are you saying that even if it does not pass, let's say, are we still going to put this in front of the legislature as the first proposal or as the second proposal? Or why would we vote to do things that are pending our vote next week?
You mean as far as like upping the Rafferty group?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I'm just curious.
Well, I know they've been putting a lot of work in currently with talking to, as well as Phil has and Nancy, talking to the different stakeholders. I know we've had meetings with Iowa Land Title and that, so they've put in a lot of extra hours now, but I can see this point as far as projection.
We have already passed something that we want to pursue, though. It's just some breakouts is really what we're looking at. So I don't think it's that we're not going to pursue it. So it's still going to take work by them. Is that what you're asking, Renee?
Yeah, so we're still going to put something in front of the legislature, even if the second proposal doesn't pass.
Yes, because the proposal would just be to amend the first one. As
Okay.
far as breakouts, that's what's anticipated.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome.
Any further discussions? Questions? Okay.
This is Mel. Sorry.
Nope, you're fine.
I would say with the other thing, we'll still have to move forward in some way with a statewide notification system, correct? Because your representative was introducing that and kind of put it on hold with our fee modernization. So if things would change with what we passed at summer school, we're still going to have to introduce some sort of notification system, which would be an extra expense with the Rafferty group, right? Because they would engage with that.
Or that's would be my assumption as well, that they will that they would engage with Senator Dickey about how we can go about making good on, because I don't think he's going to drop it. So I do anticipate that they would have a lot of discussions with him and others that would be on the same page as Senator Dickey.
I guess a kind of an observation I would make, this is Phil, is that I have a pretty clear read from the leadership of the association, and we'll discuss this further, but that they're going to advocate something, okay? And, you know, through the process, we anticipate there are going to be adjustments, there are going to be changes. You know, you never get out of the legislature exactly what you propose. It never happens. If nothing else, you know, there will be changes when you put a bill into the Legislative Services Agency and ask them to give you the official draft. The language that comes back to you might not look the same as what you sent in. And that is just the nature of the process. Everything that I have observed from you all so far suggests that we're going to be advocating for an initiative. And it's going to include a fee change and a group of policies operating under the label of modernization. I would just say I'm very confident that that general thing is going to happen, but there may be variations and differences. We're not talking about unreasonable people here. So let's just assume, which I don't think will happen, but assume for a moment that the wheels fall off entirely. And you end up saying, never mind, we can't do it. I don't see that happening, but if that happens, then we'll go back to Bob and Nick and talk to them again. Okay, that they don't operate that way. If you change your mind and you say never mind, you know, we'll figure it. Okay, I'm confident that we could do that. So I would want the ESS committee in approving this amendment to move forward with the confidence that there is a very high likelihood that an initiative will be advanced to the legislature. But if something happens and that does not occur, then we'll be back to you to talk about an alternative. So be confident in that. We're gonna be reasonable. We're gonna do the right thing. And boy, everything I've seen you guys talk about as a group, as an association, as a governing board for ESS, we might differ about this point or that, but I really have a sense that you're going to go for something. So let's operate on that assumption. You shouldn't feel confident in that.
Absolutely. We've been working on this for 20 years since I've been around and longer, but it's just, I think this is the best legislation that I have seen come out of this committee and group. I agree. I feel very confident that something's going to come of it. It will be beneficial to all the counties.
And kind of going on, there is discussion in the chat. Boone County pointed out that some land record management systems offer the property fraud notification, and they license that technology all over the country. I will say the same thing. There's several of them in here that say that our systems don't offer that. And several of us have checked with, I myself a couple of years ago checked with Fiddler, and it's way more than I can afford as a smaller county. And that's kind of being reiterated here in the chat too, that not all of the counties can afford to pay for it on their own. And if we're going to be mandated to provide it, I think it just makes sense to make it affordable for everybody. And I feel as the ESS committee, it would be our responsibility to weigh the cost of doing it internally versus farming it out. So I think that's a later discussion once things pass for this committee. I don't know if anybody agrees with me or not, but that's my thoughts.
And I agree, and we all know that the legislature is not gonna give us the money to do it. It's gonna be on our shoulders.
This is gonna be another one.
Yeah, this is census. I just want us to remember that the lobbying process, it's a process, it's not once off. And so a lot of the work that happens either happens in conversation with legislators and stakeholders at the Capitol, or for instance, Bob and Nick meeting them at other campaign meetings, or when they're discussing with them other projects, then they also bring in the work that is happening with ESS. It requires building this relationship, and when you build them, you are also building trust. And that trust means you are going to get really good engagement from your lobbyists at the Capitol. So this is a lot of the work that happens, and they have built a lot of trust with people. Bob knows the history of ILR. When he talks about it and assists with work on it, it comes from a different place, not just as a financial project, but rather something he also believes is important for our state. So there is a lot of support, and we know that through that process, they come with it in a good manner when they are talking about our legislation, discussing what the proposals are, and getting the truth from the other stakeholders. Stakeholders only tell you the truth after they've built trust. Without that trust, you will not get any of that honesty. And it takes time. This is why you see our conversations continuing, and this is why the budget reflects that type of relationship.
Thank you, Census. Okay, we're gonna try it one more time. Any more questions regarding the budget amendment? We'll wait till everybody gets muted. They're unmuted. Okay.
This is Julie.
Okay, Julie.
I move to approve the budget amendment as presented.
You made the motion?
Yes.
Okay, Julie's motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Natalie.
Who, is that Natalie?
Yes.
So I have a motion and a second to approve the budget amendment as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carried. So can we just go ahead and approve the CSI agreement so we get all the agreements out of the way, and then we can talk about the temporary alternative redaction process?
Well, I think we already have actually, but I would just add that Kelly and I are going to be meeting with the CSI Tyler team this afternoon to talk about what the next steps are going to be as far as turning the service back on. We have a little bit of testing to do with them to make sure that that they are going to be able to perform basically the pull of the documents to process them and then return them. Our intention would be, as soon as that is ready, is to turn on, first of all, the forward file process, and as a part of that, obviously communicate with the counties on when that will begin. I think an optimistic scenario is that could begin as early as next week. But don't take that to the bank until you hear from us. We have not broadly communicated to the membership of the Reporters Association yet, because we need everybody to just keep doing what they've been doing, notify us when they see something, and then we can take appropriate action through our temporary process. As soon as we're ready to go, we'll notify everybody that the new, I should say, the modified process is in production, and then they can stand down from having to pay close attention to it again. Once we've done that, then we will go through a process of taking all of the records recorded from the date of the outage through the current date, and basically process those and identify anything that might have been missed, that the human inspection just didn't catch. And then we're going to make sure that we take appropriate efforts to redact those as soon as we find them. And once that is completed, then we will start the redaction process for any backfile documents, any older documents that are in the queue, but we just stopped doing that when this interruption occurred. We'll restart that after we get other things going, and then we'll also be continuing on with the back to blue redactions as they occur. Again, as I repeated earlier or said earlier, this extension is basically through June 30, 2025. If we were to decide to continue to work with CSI in the future beyond that, we would probably do that as an amendment to our master agreement with Tyler Technologies, which is now the owner of that process. And so this is probably the last amendment you'll ever do with CSI directly. It'll be with Tyler in the future if we decide to do that. And I'm probably going to make Kelly nervous here when I say this, but I think we are intent on exploring other alternatives, including the idea of internalizing it. That internalization process basically includes two components, and that is configuring some type of OCR system on our own or with another technology partner, and then actually doing the redactions programmatically within our system, probably coupled with some human inspection by our support team instead of by staff and our service providers. So a lot of planning has to be done with that. I know I get in trouble when I start making estimates of things, but you know, there will be a cost to an internal redaction process. I believe that it can be done at a lower cost than what we're doing right now. And that's what we'll shoot for. So I would request your approval of this amendment with CSI.
Are there any questions either in regard to the agreement extension or temporary redaction process? Questions for Phil or Kelly? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the CSI agreement extension.
This is Julie. I move to approve CSI agreement extension.
I'll second. This is Lindsay.
Okay. Julie has made the motion and Lindsay has seconded to approve. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll move on. Hey, the end is in sight. Okay, project updates.
Okay, we will be as efficient as we can with this. I did ask Kelly to join us to participate in the update. And I don't know if Kelly has the agenda in front of him, so I'll just call him out. But we did talk a little bit, Kelly, about our work with Light Edge. I wondered if you could give your perspective on where we stand with the migration and how it's been going, and answer any questions the committee may have about that topic. Go ahead.
Sure. So the things that we have completed, the major task, of course, is migrating the virtual environment that was internal off to the Light Edge cloud. That was completed. That was completed back in March, I think, at the end of March, beginning of May. And then, you know, we got all of our equipment that we had in our rack was recycled. And then since then, you know, as they come back up, we've discontinued our software and support subscriptions for, you know, like Cisco and Dell and VMware. So we're not renewing any of those. And many of those had cost increases, of course, along with everything else associated with them. So we've avoided that. In terms of the remaining work, really where we're at right now is we're kind of right sizing the environment and looking for additional areas where we can kind of continue to cut costs while maximizing what we're paying for in terms of usage within the production environment. So we've kind of had throughout the years, we've kind of had our environment split up into 3 different categories. We've had a production environment, kind of a staging QA, so that the service providers can test with. And then we've also had our internal dev environment, which is not publicly accessible, but we've had it internal the entire time. And it's kind of come around that we're going to continue to kind of work on that angle to cut some costs a little bit. So we're going to look at migrating our dev initially off to more of an on-demand type of an approach, rather than use those resources for something that's running full-time, because we're not, typically only using that during the working hours during the day. Those systems don't need to be up and available to anybody but the internal developers. So we're going to look at, and we have been looking at migrating those off to something like AWS, where we can do more on-demand work, and only pay for what we use. So that's something that we're looking at in terms of cost savings and working on. And then depending on that, how that kind of rolls out and how well that goes, we may do the same thing with the staging and QA environment, which does a couple things for us. One, it gives us our what we're paying for in the Light Edge cloud. It gives us room to maybe expand the production side a little more while staying within the boundaries of the contract that we signed with Light Edge. And then the second thing is it also gives us an opportunity to work towards a potential on-demand environment, should things with Light Edge not go well or work out. We don't want to have all of our eggs in one basket, and it's kind of a plan B a little bit. We don't have any imminent plans to move away from Light Edge, but you don't know where the costs are going to take us down the road, and we want to have some experience with a more on-demand environment. Is kind of just where that is. So we're spending a little time. We're going to move dev off first, see how that goes, and begin to take a look at our staging QA environment. We won't be moving anything in the near term from the production side off. Other than that,
to a higher level, Kelly, just to go up to maybe 30,000 feet, would you characterize the transition to Light Edge as being successful and worthwhile?
Yes, I mean, essentially, we've done a couple things there. One is that we freed up a little bit of my time, and when we finish this right sizing movement, I'll have additional time to spend on the development, which was one of the main features of getting over into the cloud. 2 is it's going to save us from the costs associated with having to do the hardware purchases and software purchases that gets bundled in with Light Edge. And then kind of a third thing that goes along with that is we, in essence, have hired a fourth employee, Light Edge takes care of all the patching and maintenance of the hardware that we're running on. I do not have to do that any longer. They have the capability to have high availability so that they're not down when they're doing that patching. So a lot of that security stuff, a lot of the patching and maintenance, replacement of hardware, that's all built into the Light Edge process. We don't have to worry about that anymore. So that's a huge load off my shoulders. We're paying for it, but we're going to work on putting that back into the software development side once we're done with this right sizing process.
And one thing that I talked about with the committee a little bit when we were working on the budget is the potential change in the operating software from SUSE to something else. And we also discussed, how we might be able to take advantage of some of the tools that go with that so that we don't have to pay for the subscription for Nessus anymore. Maybe you can say that more correctly than
Yeah,
maybe
no,
what
I, yeah, that's, I mean, it's really what it is. Since we came, in 2009, when we spun the environment back up on a virtualized platform, during the migration from ABC Virtual, we have been using, SUSE is the name of the operating system for those that don't know. And we really have not gone shopping, if you will, for price reductions, and the prices continued to creep up a little bit. And that, among other things, has kind of changed over the years in terms of now that we've moved on to a cloud, they've kind of changed our licensing structure as well. So that really bumped up the cost. So it was time to kind of go shopping. We had a meeting with a company called Ubuntu. Canonical is their parent company. I think they're based out of Texas, but well known in the community, widely supported, widely distributed distribution of Linux is what we're on, and they came in significantly under the price of SUSE. So it was good for us to do some shopping, and we're kind of working towards an eventual migration on the operating system side internally. I hope is transparent as possible. We'll be kind of working on that as time goes along. Again, we've got until next summer to kind of get things migrated, so that's going to be a bit of ongoing work.
Thank you, Kelly. If I could just switch topics just a little bit, and then we can go to general questions. Let's talk a little bit about the migration to the e-submission API. I know Muna's not able to be with us today, but we've completed the migration with solutions. We are close to completing, or I think we have completed the migration with the COT, the counties that are served by COT. I'm aware that DevNet for Marshall County, and I believe that Avenue Insights with Ringgold County, they're in development. Tyler, which is another large service provider that serves many counties, they're underway, they're in testing. We hope that they can get back in the saddle here shortly. I'd like to see them complete their migration by the end of August, if possible. The only service provider that is not going to be able to complete the migration within the current timeframe is Fiddler. I don't know if I can fully explain what their rationale was, except that they want to complete some internal software development before they make the move. But they are at least preparing to move to the e-submission API partially, but still using a different recording stamp process than we want them to use. So generally speaking, we're getting closer to make that transition. I want to just briefly mention one other thing that, we have a service provider that serves a lot of county solutions who is going through some staffing changes, partially because of illness from one of their key developers that supported our counties for many, many years. And we're going to be patient with them as they kind of work through those new processes, and we would encourage the counties that are served by them to, allow them a little time to get adjusted before making any rash moves. So anything that you might have related to work with local service providers or e-submission API, any updates that you might want to share on that, Kelly? If you
I
have
mean,
any.
not necessarily. I mean, you kind of gave a good overview of it. The only thing I would just say is, the general strategic objective there was to pull back from having the LCM deployed on, multiple county machines and have to do, any type of support was always a little bit difficult, sometimes gaining access. So we wanted a bit more of a clear delineation between the responsibilities between the service provider and us. So, and that pays off a little bit, I think, for the service providers too, right? Because I do believe that the LCM, in a sense, limited the opportunities that they had to provide local software that would work in a seamless fashion. So I think that was a bit of a win-win. And, from our perspective, we've really seen the support requests, if anything, to the LCM just drop completely almost. Rarely are we getting a call to support that anymore. So I see that as a win. I think the service providers see that as a win, not having to get us involved and support those type of things. If there's an issue, generally we know one way or the other whose side of the fence that's on. And it's a lot easier to resolve. So I think that's paid off. And, along with the county, the e-submission side, we're gonna do the same thing on the search or portal upload side as well. And that's getting ready to roll out pretty soon. So we'll go through the same thing there. And hopefully, and I don't remember, Phil, what our timeline was, but hopefully within the next year, we'll be completely migrated. And internally, there's going to be work for us to do to clean up old code and stuff like that. But, at the end of the day, it's really a reduction in support and a more seamless integration for the counties.
And then the last question I have for you, I'm kind of throwing you stuff here, so I appreciate your patience with me. But Lisa and I have talked to you at various points in time about wanting to get the new e-submission search function for reporters to be able to just search by date implemented, and the development work on that is significantly done, but it's not done because the search methodology just is not designed to work efficiently, and we need to do something different than that, similar to what we've done with recently recorded. And I wondered if you could speak to that. And then I've selfishly want to ask you from your perspective. I didn't prep you for this, but we talked about if we had additional resources, we would hire additional developers. Do you think we need additional developers, Kelly?
Well, so for the first thing, in terms of the coding for those reports, yeah, I mean, what we're talking about there is performance optimization. And this comes up, even on the legacy side to some degree, that as systems collect more data and the repositories of data get larger, there are modifications that need to be done behind the scenes to continue to provide data in a responsive time frame, right? So when this system was built in 2005, if you had 500 or 10,000 e-submissions that you had to sort through and read through, that wasn't such a big issue. But now that you have potentially 3, 4, 5 million, or on the portal side, when you're searching through potentially 80, 90, or 100 million grant or grantee records, it's a big difference. So there are things that you have to pay attention to on the development side in order to optimize that performance so that folks are not waiting there or getting errors on the screen when they're wanting data to come back to them. So that's kind of where we're at. in terms of the e-submission reports right now, is we need to go back through. The main function is there, but we need to go through and optimize that data query and the return of it, so we aren't getting errors and slowing down the system. In terms of resources, yeah, additional resources are always nice. I think obviously we want to be mindful and planful about going forward, that we have enough resources to support that going forward. But yeah, there's plenty of things that we can do and continue to do in the system. There's a lot of data projects that we have that have been on the docket for a long time. There's a lot of third-party tie-ins that we've discussed and have wanted to do for a long time, that it's just simply going to require time and effort to do. And having an internal employee do that, in my mind, as long as it's sustainable, right? At least you have that amount planned for, is probably a better route than going out and grabbing consulting services, which can be expensive for short durations. But yeah, that we have plenty of things to do. There's always something we can find to do to make the system better, and that would be helpful. And it's not to say that I can use Mancy as an example. Somebody decided to go part-time. So that's half a resource that we don't have available to us any longer. So rather than having 3 full-time employees, we're down to 2.5. At one point, or for a short time, we did have 4. And that was helpful. I think we were productive during that time period. So, being 1.5 less than what we were at one point. Yeah, I mean, it's always helpful having more hands.
I'll stop there, Kelly. I would invite the members of this committee to toss in whatever question you might want to throw his way.
Anybody have any questions for Kelly? Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks for all you've done for us. Thanks for everything you've done for us. I know you've been around a long time. And you don't look anywhere worse.
Except when Kelly started, his kids were little, and now one of them's in college.
Yeah, I'm going to have a college graduate this year and a high school graduate this year. We're officially at the end of this year. We're going to be kind of empty nesters, I guess. So it's kind of crazy to say, but.
So you're saying you're going to have more time?
No,
I'm going to have more time.
I would just say, Kelly, in front of everybody, and Lisa and I should tell you this all the time, how appreciative and lucky we are to have your talent and the longevity that you've given to the project and to the recorders. It really means a lot. If we were, one thing you didn't mention is, having a team with that internal knowledge base. We made a ton of progress in the creation of the new search application, but those guys are gone. And the institutional knowledge of that coding is just not in-house anymore. And it's just more difficult to do. And the other thing, kind of just to, address, what's the justified need for additional staff, is that, we deal every day with the desire from recorders to provide a support for this or that, and the issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis are so big that they just demand the full attention of our development and our administrative team. So we haven't been able to get to some of those things the way I think some people would like us to do. Part of the idea of having some additional resources in-house is to be in a position to provide some of that technical support on a more timely basis. So, for those who are might have heard from one quarter or another, why is there a need for that additional staff? It's a huge backlog. I think Kelly understated it in a certain manner, that if we're really gonna address some of those things that you want us to address and take on some of the initiatives that people want us to take on, it's gonna take manpower, human power to get those done. So, Kelly, thank you very much for all your work, and I see some comments in the chat pod we'll send you that are very complimentary, so we'll make sure you get those.
Thanks for your exceptional service.
Thank you.
On limited resources.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
So I'll conclude and just say, in the packet of materials, is a copy of the annual report that is out there, that we've shared with the supervisors. And we just want to remind you of that if you need a resource to kind of give that talk or share with people what we're doing. I think we've covered pretty much everything else, unless Lisa, you or Kristen, if she's still with us, if you have any communications or customer support updates that you want to share before we adjourn.
Kristen, you want to go first? I think
Can
you
I-
have a.
Can I mention something quick about the annual report?
Yes.
Okay, I really would like and encourage everyone to get in front of their supervisors and share that annual report. Super important that they know what we're doing in our office, and I think this is an excellent way to do so. It gives history, it gives trends, it shows, why some of the budgetary things that we're requesting, it's all there. So shout out to everyone on the ILR team that has put this together. I know my supervisors appreciated it. The newspaper did an article on it. So it is important. And as we continue to move forward with our modernization efforts, this is one step in that direction to have those conversations. So I encourage everyone to do so as well.
I would agree with Lindsay. If my board of supervisors wouldn't even see it if it's attached to an email. And if it comes in the mail, they probably just, oh yeah, we'll throw it aside. Whereas if it's on the board agenda, they have to address it, so.
And I think too, it's important that the public knows what's happening
Exactly.
and where the dollars are being spent, so.
Yeah. Yep, good idea. So. Okay.
Nancy had joined.
Okay.
Okay. So you guys know Nancy, our other developer, she had joined. I don't think Marta jumped in, but.
We won't make her give a presentation, but Nancy, say hi if you can.
Hello everyone, I'm here.
Oh, and baby.
Excuse me, you can hear the little one, so she's always around. She don't leave me now.
Can we see her?
Of course, hold on.
She's some kind of cute baby.
Oh,
she's
Aw,
precious.
sweet girl.
Look at that.
Beautiful.
Kitty.
She's gonna be a year old in a couple weeks. Yeah.
Love it.
Like, can I play on the meeting?
Thank you.
Okay, did I hear Kristen was gonna do a presentation on communications update?
Hi, excuse me. I don't have a presentation for you, but it's been a while since I've talked to you guys, so I did want to go over a few communications things. And thank you again for your comments about the annual report. Census mentions this from time to time that she'll meet some county supervisors or other people within our counties that don't know who Iowa Land Records is. And the best way to do that is to get in front of them and share the annual report. It's amazing to me, and I know I'm in the right field because I think it's amazing how well video or an image sticks in someone's mind. And also that personal connection. You can send them lots and lots of long emails, but something about that personal connection and having a pretty picture, it really does go a long way. So, and speaking of that, I wanted to touch base on the hub and the newsletter. And Phil also kind of talked a little bit about the deputies conference too, which the deputies conference is coming up very quickly. And we did set a due date for August 27th, and that's less than 2 weeks away. Registration costs pretty much covers the event budget, and as Sam shared earlier, we have 32 participants. So we do get a little bit more people that register after the ISAC conference, because I'll speak at that next week too briefly. But we could really use your support in speaking with your districts and encouraging them to send someone from their county if they can. I know a lot of counties are have limited staff and everybody can spare sending that extra person for a whole day, but it's very valuable to for training, and gives them a chance, gives the deputies and supporting staff a chance to connect with other people within your district. I've also been planning on grouping people by service provider too. So they'd have a chance to talk to other people that use Solutions or Tyler Eagle. And it's just a really unique opportunity because they don't get a chance to meet like you guys do at the ISAC conference. So I appreciate your help in doing that, sharing the news about the deputies conference. I did send a reminder last week, and we'll be sending something out again, hopefully before the conference next week. But again, that deadline is the 27th, and that's very soon. So moving on from that, I didn't want to share with the ICRA hub. We are seeing a steady flow and use of that. But of course, I always know that there are more resources and more information that we'd always put on the hub. But most of the time when people are reminded to go check out the hub is when we send the newsletter. And the newsletter has not been getting as many recorders and their staff. Not as many people are opening that as they used to. And I've heard some really good feedback in the last couple of months that there are some questions about, what's going on with our meetings, and maybe what's going on in the customer newsletters. So I would like to try to kind of revamp a little of the content on the newsletter, and wanted to let you guys know what I was thinking. Firstly, just having a PDF copy of the customer newsletter in that recorder's newsletter. Generally speaking, we haven't been doing that because the customer newsletter is reflecting the same information that's on the newsletter you guys get. So really the only difference would be that you get a version that has more details than the ILR users get. And so I think to help with that, we just have a copy there, and I'm not sure how it'll go, but also thinking about doing some very brief highlights from recent meetings. You can go to our website and get to the recordings of these meetings and read the minutes. Obviously, we can't share everything because there's not enough space, but I know that it can get a little overwhelming when we have so much going on. So maybe this is something we can play with to try to help bridge some of those communication gaps. And if you guys ever have any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear it. But I just want to play around with that a little bit and see if we can make that newsletter a more relatable resource for you. The reality is not everybody's going to look at it, but it used to be a couple of months ago that more people were. So, I want to make that more relevant to you and update it. Another thing that I've started doing with for the ILR users and for you guys is pushing more people to visit our YouTube channel. Because we have added a lot more content to that. If you go just to their channel, you can find all of our meeting recordings, which are also linked on our website. And anytime we have a webinar, we also share that on there as well. And we do have a unlisted list of YouTube videos posted that are relevant to you guys. And unlisted means if you go there, you can't see it unless you already have the link. So it's just a roundabout way for you guys to go to the hub and see. There's an example of what's on that list would be how to customize the brochure on a PDF. And I show you different ways how you can go in there and add your information. That would be an example of something on there. So there's a lot of room for growth, and we learned a lot from the ILR user, the stakeholder modernization survey. There were a few comments on what people would like to see and what they would like to learn more about. And so time is limited, but we do have some plans to add more training and specific resources to some of those common questions. So that's another thing about that survey that was incredibly valuable. So lots going on. So I just wanted to give you a quick update and just kind of open things up and ask if you guys had any questions or comments for me before we move on.
And you'll be at the conference next week, right? So.
Yep.
Did anybody have any questions for Kristen?
Or if you think on it and come up with something, you can always email me. And again, I'll be there on Thursday next week with the team.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Is it me? Is it me? Okay, first, I think we need to thank Kristen for her patience with the annual report, because editing is a team sport in our office. And there were a lot of take this comma out, put this dash in, that should not be capitalized. So definitely a team sport. If she doesn't get a trophy, she should get that participation medal. As you are hearing from people that want to be able to use the Iowa Land Records website, we hear, hey, they told me to call you. You know what, if you can direct them to our landing page, iowalandrecords.org, the applications are in the upper right corner. We do process all of those within 24 hours, but usually much sooner. So that will save them a step. Point of sale, we talked about that we have completed the transition. And if you do have your old device, pass that on to your IT department for recycling. We don't have to return those. And finally, a couple things. One, yes, we'll be at ISAC. If you have something you want included in the presentation, shoot us an email at support or directly to one of us, and we'll make sure that happens. If you or a member of your team is locked out of land records, as a recorder or a deputy, you can update those passwords by logging in, going to admin and then users, and then resetting the password. So that will eliminate the time of calling us or shooting us a message if you want to try to take that on yourself. Questions, anyone?
So at the conference next week, Kristen's gonna give an update, Lisa's gonna give an update. Census is gonna talk about advocacy, and I'll be there too. So I think we've taken enough time for everybody today. Appreciate all the good discussion. I would just mention that based on the results of our polling, that we are intending to have a special meeting on August 28th. The primary purpose of that is to talk about the policy and modernization and what needs to be done going forward. We are planning for that to be a face-to-face meeting for those who can attend. And stay tuned for further details in the next week. That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. With that,
Thank you.
we'll adjourn. Have a good day.